Well, Shalom, I just returned from Israel celebrating Shavuot with my son. And I perform these rehearsals 3 times a year because I find it's an excellent time to synchronize and recalibrate our lives. And we're living in a culture and a society that's so removed from the ways of Yah that only when we step outside of it can we completely see how bad it really is. And of course, I have a full-time job and a part-time job. Well, we're also doing the work of Shema Yisrael, and it's important to earn a living. Shema Yisrael does not earn a living. We use the resources to do the service of the Messiah. And so immediately upon my return, I had to go to court and do the chores and dealing with the mundane issues of this world once again. And it struck me how so much of it involves people arguing about money, these little green pieces of paper with Babylonian symbols all over them, and how easy it is for people to lose their focus from the eternal, what's really important, and they end up dwelling on and stressing about the temporal issues and worries of the world. And Yeshua specifically instructed in Matthew 6, beginning at 31, he says, "Therefore, do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, and what shall we drink, and what shall we wear? For all these things the Gentiles, the nations seek. For your heavenly Father knows that you need all these things. But seek first the kingdom of Elohim and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about its own things. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble." And then he continues on in Matthew 7, 1. "Judge not, that you not be judged. For with what judgment you judge, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. And why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but not consider the plank in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me remove the speck from your eye, and look, a plank is in your own eye? Hypocrite! First remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye." And, the world is full of lost people who argue about petty things because they're not subjected to the will of the Master. And so many people think that they're right and they want what they think they deserve. And I see this every day in the worldly legal system. People are critical and judgmental of others when they would do well to heed the words of Yeshua and look at themselves first and analyze themselves. And, this leads to something very interesting, because upon my return from the land, I had a sister contact me about a video someone had done about an article I written years ago. In fact, years ago while I was in Jerusalem, I had a couple people ask me about a teaching they'd heard about the Melchizedek priesthood. And I responded by email, and then after receiving a couple other inquiries, I decided I better just turn the email into an article that I could post on the website so people could just read that. Of course, I didn't name any names. I didn't, pinpoint where the teaching came from, because I really didn't know much about it. First of all, I never get into these internet tit-for-tats with people because I think it's cheap and immature. And I don't think believers should be getting into internet battles with other believers. It's definitely contrary to the teachings of Yeshua and the Torah. Also, I didn't even realize that the teaching actually belonged to one person in particular. Usually truth is truth, supported by scriptures, and it either stands or falls on its own, and it doesn't derive from one particular person. Truth derives from Yahweh Elohim. So, for instance, I write books about the Sabbath and the name of Elohim, but they don't belong to me. These subjects don't belong to me. They're not my personal truths. I don't feel the need to attack an individual if they don't believe the information contained within the writings. Well, apparently this Melchizedek teaching was different. It was actually attached to a particular man who got a hold of my article, and apparently he was offended and felt the need to make a video critiquing the article and then defending his position. So after being told that by this sister, I was curious, and I clicked the link and really couldn't watch it for more than a few minutes. It started out with a man standing on a podium, and of course, the first thing I think of when I see that is the Nicolaitan Babylonian church system with one man at the center of it all, teaching and instructing the masses and leading the masses. And that's exactly the opposite of what Yeshua taught. In Mark 9:35, he said, he called us 12 and said, if anyone desires to be first, he shall be last of all and a servant. So, we've inherited this Nicolaitan church system with the head ruling over and teaching over the masses. And of course, that's really the opposite of the way we're supposed to be operating in the kingdom. The first shall be last, and the last shall be first, and the greatest is the servant of them all. And Yeshua actually lived that out and showed us. So this whole concept of somebody standing up and preaching every week to the masses, I just think is contrary to the way Yeshua operated and the way we're supposed to operate in the kingdom. After seeing the presentation and the format, then this person went on to talk about money. Of course, where to send your money and how to get your money to them. And of course, once again, that's what we've inherited from this Babylonian church system, and I just don't think we should be operating like the system that we came out of. The third thing that I immediately noticed was pride, the need to defend his hallmark teaching, and his ego seemed to be attached to this teaching, and he felt the need to defend his teaching and critique an opinion that was different than his. And I don't know if the brother intended to sound pompous and condescending and arrogant, but that was definitely the tone. And it was only after a couple minutes that I'd really seen enough and just didn't feel the need to watch any further. This was not the kingdom of Elohim in operation. It was the world, and it was just more Babylonian religion. And I'm seeing so much of this with men who may have some truth, but they get caught up in building their own kingdoms, this kingdom around their personalities, and they end up forgetting the weightier matters of the Torah. As Yeshua described in Matthew 23:23, he said that the weightier matters were justice, mercy, and faithfulness. And a brother named Skip Moen really nicely summarized that teaching by Yeshua. He stated that these three stand out as the true measures of godly obedience. That shouldn't be a surprise to anyone who knows who Elohim is and how he acts. And the real test of our relationship with Elohim and with others is found in these three things. To do justice is to act toward others in a way that glorify or magnify Elohim, account for the dignity he placed in men, and redeem the earth so that it reflects the values of heaven. To show mercy is to set aside my rights and my agenda so that others might prosper under Yah's care and provision. In particular, it means accepting the consequences due others so that I might share in the forgiveness Yeshua has shown me. And to be faithful is to follow Torah. Faithfulness is not simply keeping your word, it's keeping your promise to act as a citizen in Elohim's kingdom, where he determines what is good and what is prohibited. It's to live in a way that sets you apart from the world because you absorb his instructions and manifest them each and every day. And I think that really is poignant in this whole discussion. Of course, these are all attributes of a person clothed in humility. And humility is the opposite of pride. And sadly, we have so much of the world mixed into our lives and our religions that most people can't even tell the difference anymore. And I'm used to seeing this type of conduct in the world. I'm in court almost every day, arguing positions and presenting cases before judges. But those of us in the kingdom don't operate in that system with one another. At least we're not supposed to. We're subject to a different set of rules. And people can decide for themselves what the scriptures say about the Melchizedek priesthood and the book of the law and the book of the covenant. And ultimately, though, Yeshua, our high priest, will set everything straight. In fact, he already told us how he would judge us in Matthew 25:31 through 40. He says, when the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the set-apart angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them one from another as a shepherd divides his sheep from the goats. And he will set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right hand, Come, you blessed of the Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. Then the righteous will answer him, saying, Master, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and gave you drink? When did we see you a stranger and take you in, or naked and clothe you? Or when did we see you sick or in prison and come to you? And the king will answer and say to them, Assuredly, I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these, my brethren, you did it to me. So it's not about building our kingdoms and defending ourselves or our positions. Rather, it's about pouring out our lives and not being offended, practicing humility and doing the work as demonstrated by Yeshua, our Messiah. And the true test of a person is not the number of books they've written, or the number of videos that they've posted, or the number of people who attend their congregation. The question is not how much we know, but rather what we are becoming. And I think that's really an important point I've been trying to stress through the Leaving Babylon series, and it's becoming more and more evident that this is what needs to be our focus. Are we clothing the naked? Are we feeding the hungry? Are we helping the stranger, the sick, and the prisoner? These are all things that we're doing at Shema Israel. In fact, I'm going to the hospital after I filmed this video because I see the need to obey the Messiah and do the work that he told us to do. And this is the true service of Messiah, and it helps keep us grounded and focused. And I suggest that we all spend more time doing these things and less time attending Shabbat services or Messianic conferences or watching all these YouTube videos out there. They can end up being a really big distraction. You know, I write my books so that people can read them and then learn how to walk in the light. My entire purpose is to point people to the path so that they can walk in it, not just to sell books and get people to read more of my books and like my videos and things of that sort. Because ultimately, it's about what we do with our lives. And in fact, I was recently at the traditional location of the Mount of Beatitudes in the Galilee, and it's always refreshing to review the words of Messiah spoken at the Sermon on the Mount that we read in Matthew 5. And I'll just read them right now, because it says, And seeing the multitudes, he went up on the mountain, and when he was seated, his disciples came to him. Then he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see Elohim. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of Elohim. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they revile and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my name. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. So we read about the poor in spirit, those who mourn, the meek, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, the merciful, the pure in heart, the peacemakers, the persecuted. These are the ones who are blessed, and to these belong the kingdom of Elohim. These are the attributes that we should be emulating, and this is the walk we all need to be focusing on every day of our lives. And it helps us if we step outside our routines and our bubbles and get a fresh perspective on how we're living, because sometimes we can see that we are definitely not on the path that we're supposed to be on. And of course, that's what the appointed times are for. We have a weekly Shabbat, not to congregate in churches or synagogues and listen to men teach from podiums and preach, but to hear his voice while we rest in his peace and experience his presence in our dwellings. We then have the 3 annual appointed times where we visit him at his dwelling place, where he places his name. And of course, that place was Jerusalem and will again be in Zion. Although we're looking forward to a house built by Messiah, not a house built by men, There's currently no house, but we can still rehearse these times. And I find great value in these rehearsals. And after 20 years of rehearsing in the land, I enjoy bringing others to rehearse in the covenant land. And that's why we've been doing our tours over the past several years, to take people to the land as a reset and refocus, so that they can renew and refresh and recalibrate. And it's important to keep our focus straight in these days, especially these days of great deception. Last year I produced the Leaving Babylon series, which is intended to help people keep their focus and stay on the straight path. And of course, a big part of that involves the appointed times. And I'm currently working on a book entitled The Synagogue of Satan, and it talks about how the synagogue became the focus of religious power, especially after the destruction of the temple. And of course, the focus was always supposed to be on Yah, and he designed for himself a tent to dwell in. Although David sought to build a temple of stone, which was thereafter built by Solomon, that was never in the plan. Yah never provided plans for that. And these temples of stone are what men do. And they end up becoming idols, and we see that repeatedly throughout history, how although Yah allowed men to build these temples of stone, they became idols and they were eventually destroyed. And we're currently witnessing a time when men who do not believe in Yeshua are planning to rebuild another temple. And many who believe in Messiah are excited about this, and they're actually participating in this process, which is quite literally anti-Christ or anti-Messiah, because it's attempting to essentially just ignore the work of Yeshua, the Messiah, and just continue on where they left off prior to the destruction of the temple by the Romans. So this is a time of great confusion and deception, and it's not a time for brethren to attack one another. Yeshua said in John 13:34, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." And we're dealing with some dangerous issues, and the enemy would like nothing more than to divide and conquer those who follow Messiah Yeshua. Therefore, I suggest we all focus on loving one another and humility. And of course, I'm not alone in that belief. I've been spending a lot of time examining the lives of Peter and James, whose real name was Yaakov. And I'm struck by the contrast between their lives and the way we live in this modern culture. They were given great power filled with the Spirit, but they lived lives of poverty and simplicity. In fact, they were both known to be vegetarians and had very strict, simple, basic diets such as olives and bread. And their lives were marked by humility, and they advocated humility. In 1 Peter 5:5 we read, "Likewise, you younger people, submit yourselves to your elders. Yes, all of you, be submissive to one another and be clothed with humility. For Elohim resists the proud, gives grace to the humble." And of course, James gave a great teaching in James 4, beginning at 6. He says, "But he gives more grace, therefore," he says, "God resists the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. Therefore, submit to Elohim. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to Elohim, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Lament and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves in the sight of Yah, and he will lift you up. Do not speak evil of one another, brethren. He who speaks evil of a brother and judges his brother speaks evil of the Torah and judges the Torah. But if you judge the Torah, you are not a doer of the Torah, but a judge. Therefore, there's one Torah giver who is able to save and to destroy. Who are you to judge another? These are two great examples from those who were taught directly by Yeshua the Messiah. So I suggest we all take the time to seek humility, because it may be what we need for the coming day of Yahuwah, as we read in Zephaniah 2:3. "Seek Yahuwah, all you meek of the earth, who have upheld his justice. Seek righteousness Seek humility. It may be you will be hidden in the day of Yahweh's anger. Shalom.